On the lab report, we'll learn that living things have variations in their traits that are determined by their genes. That some of these traits give them an advantage in surviving. And this is part of a process called natural selection. It causes living things to change over generations. Hey, I'm Dr. Jeff, and today we're learning about natural selection with the help of these dogs. Adam, Caroline, do you know what kind of dogs these are?
This is a dachshund, commonly known as a wiener dog. They have long bodies and cute little legs, which make them look like a hot dog.
And this is a pug. They're known for having short noses and being very friendly.
And this one is a greyhound. It's really good at running fast. These dogs each look very different, but they all have one thing in common. If you go back 100,000 years, the ancestors of all of these dogs were actually wolves.
So you're telling us that the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents of these dogs were wolves?
Yes.
How do you go from wolves to these dogs?
When two wolves mate, their litter of pups will have variations in their traits.
The pups are a mixture of traits from both parents.
Traits like the length of their tail, the thickness of their fur, and even their body shape.
Exactly. A person called a breeder will then select the traits they want by choosing the next set of parents.
So if two wolves with short snouts mate, then there's a good chance that their offspring will also have shorter snouts.
And if you keep selecting the shortest nosed wolves generation over generation, eventually you get a pug.
Right. And each of these dogs is the result of many generations of this breeding process, starting from wolves.
Dachshunds were bred by selecting dogs with the best senses of smell and shorter bodies to make them ideal for hunting.
And greyhounds were bred by selecting dogs that were the fastest runners for the purpose of racing. That's why they have sleek and athletic bodies.
And it's not just dogs. Humans use selective breeding on many other animals and even plants.
That's right. For example, the sheep we have today are the result of many generations of selective breeding. Farmers bred the animals with the most desirable wool in order to make more babies that look like them.
So there weren't any sheep like this before humans did this selective process?
Nope. Farm sheep were selectively bred by humans. And humans use the same process with plants too. Corn as we know it would not exist without selective breeding. Scientists discovered that all modern corn came from ancient farmers breeding a grass called teosinte.
Starting about 9,000 years ago, ancient farmers in Mexico picked the plants with the most accessible kernel to make more offspring.
And over many generations, it changed from this to this.
Exactly. But it's important to understand that this process of selection happens in nature too, without human intervention. Let's explore that next. What we just discussed is called artificial selection. That's when humans choose which organism will survive and reproduce. Now we'll discuss natural selection. That's where the same process can happen without human input. For example, in front of us are baby mice, and they have variations in their traits.
Like fur color. Each one looks slightly different.
Yes, that trait can influence which one survives. For example, in the wild, hawks love eating mice. But before they grab a tasty snack, they have to find them. Let's place these mice in a more natural setting, like on some rocks. Perfect. Help me transfer them.
Hey, little buddy.
Imagine you're a hawk flying over these dark rocks, looking for your lunch. Which ones would be harder to find?
It would be much harder to see the ones with dark fur because they blend in better.
Yeah, the white ones stick out like a sore thumb.
I agree. We can simulate a hawk's eye view by swinging our special camera over the rocks. Conrad, go ahead and swing the camera.
It's easy to spot the ones with light fur. They'll get eaten more often.
Leading to more dark mice surviving and reproducing.
Exactly. Natural selection is the process by which organisms better suited to their environment tend to survive and reproduce more often. The example we just learned about can actually be seen in real life. Meet the pocket mouse, which lives mostly in the desert.
Its light-colored fur helps it blend into the sand and avoid being eaten.
But some time ago, a lava flow spread over part of their habitat. Centuries later, scientists now find a lot of pocket mice with dark fur.
So how did they get darker fur?
Through natural selection. Remember that all populations of animals have variations in their traits. So by random chance, some pocket mice were born with darker fur.
And since darker fur increases their chances of survival in the new environment, they tend to survive more often and produce more offspring that look like them.
So, over many generations, the population of pocket mice that live on these dark rocks would change from being mostly light-colored to mostly dark-colored.
Making this an excellent example of natural selection.
Agreed, and we can show this in another way too. Let's say this is the original population of mice that lived on the desert floor. When they crawled onto the dark rocks, many of the light fur mice were picked off by hawks. The ones that survived then reproduced to make the next generation. If we do this over and over again for many generations, we can see that the population changes from being mostly light fur to mostly dark fur. We can represent this on a graph as well. At first, very few mice had dark fur, but due to the new environment and natural selection, dark mice survived more often and had more babies that look like them.
Amazing. Does this happen with other traits as well?
It can happen with any trait. Let's look at another example. Giraffes have just as many bones in their necks as people do. They're just longer.
How do their necks get like that?
Let me guess. Through the process of natural selection.
Bingo! Remember that all populations, including giraffes, have natural genetic variations, which give them different traits. In an area with limited food, giraffes with a genetic variation giving them longer necks would have a slight advantage, reaching leaves on tall trees not accessible to the other animals.
So, those longer-necked giraffes would be more likely to survive and pass on those traits to their offspring.
And over many generations, you would end up with a population with longer necks.
So, to get giraffes to look as they are today, it could have taken hundreds or even thousands of generations. Are there any examples that are faster? Ones that we can see before our eyes?
There are, but you would need an organism that goes through many generations in a single day. Something like bacteria. E. coli bacteria can divide every 20 minutes, which means they go through 75 generations in a single day. I'm gonna set up a test tube with just 3 ingredients. The first ingredient is bacteria food. That's the yellow liquid in here. Secondly, I'm gonna add a little bit of E. coli bacteria right here. Boop, perfect. And lastly, I'm gonna add an antibiotic. This is a strong one, so it should kill all the bacteria in the tube. We'll put the cap back on, and I've done the same thing for all of these tubes.
So nothing will grow in any of these tubes because of the antibiotic, right?
Correct. Now we'll put all these identical tubes in a warm incubator overnight to see if anything grows. It's now been 24 hours. Let's see if anything grew.
Well, it looks like the medicine did its job and killed all the bacteria. Nothing grew.
Wait, look at this one over here. It's cloudy. Is that bacteria?
Yes, it is.
So the bacteria in that tube was growing in a medicine that was supposed to kill it?
Correct. All it takes is one bacteria cell in the tube to get a mutation that blocks the antibiotic from entering the cell.
What's a mutation?
A mutation is a random change in our genetic material called DNA. While most traits are passed down from parents, every time cells divide, a few mutations are naturally introduced, which can also lead to new traits.
So a bacteria cell in this tube had a random mutation that stopped the antibiotic from killing it?
Correct. And since that allowed it to grow, it took over the whole tube, making millions of copies of itself. You literally just witnessed a new trait arise overnight. Now let's explore the most famous example of all. Our final example is with bird beaks. Adam is holding a finch. I'm holding a duck. And Caroline is holding a sun conure. What do you notice is different about their beaks?
The finch beak is short and pointy.
And the sun conur's beak is bigger and hooked.
And the duck's beak is flat. The shapes of these beaks are adaptations to help them eat. Sun conures like to break open nuts. Finches eat small seeds. And ducks eat plants in the water. Scientists have actually seen the shapes of bird beaks change over generations, thanks to the process of natural selection. The famous scientist Charles Darwin studied birds in the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador.
I think you mean Ecuador.
Si, senor. Long ago, a single species of finch flew to the Galapagos Islands from the mainland. On each island, the finches found different sources of food. One island offered lots of insects, another had lots of fruit, and the others had seeds. Over generations, these original finches developed wildly different beak shapes depending on the food available on their island. For example, on the island with lots of bugs, finches with slightly longer and thinner beaks caught more insects, so they survived and reproduced more often. Over generations, finches with needle-like beaks dominated, and today we call these warbler finches.
And on the island with hard seeds, finches with large beaks got the most food, so they survived and reproduced more often. Over generations, they dominated the island. Today, we call these ground finches.
Amazing. So Darwin observed these changes as evidence of natural selection.
Exactly right.
Cut. Somebody get that bird.
See, Mark?
Now, let's explore the kinds of careers you can have studying natural selection.
All living things undergo the process of natural selection. A biologist is a type of scientist that can study those changes. Some work in the field, catching and releasing species to record changes in their traits over generations. Others study the DNA of living things in the lab to understand specific mutations that cause new traits. A paleontologist is a type of scientist that studies fossils. Fossils allow us to see what life looked like millions or billions of years ago. Using fossils, we can observe how organisms change over time, gaining new traits and changing forms. For example, paleontologists have put together a series of fossils showing how a land mammal could have gradually gained new traits for living in the ocean, resulting in the whales we know today. Paleontologists continue to study the details of these changes and add more examples to the body of evidence. These are just two of the many careers you can have studying the changes in living things over time.
Today, I'll show you how to model natural selection. To do this, you will need a stopwatch, a green piece of paper, sunglasses, bubble wrap, tongs, and a variety of colorful items like paper clips. If you don't have those, you can use pieces of yarn or anything else you can think of. First, scatter your colorful items on the green paper like this. Next, fold your bubble wrap around your glasses. Now, put them on. Start your timer and collect as many pieces as you can see, one at a time. Stop after 20 seconds. And go. Time. Now, take your glasses off and see what you got. Most of the green paper clips remain because they have a trait that gave them an advantage in surviving in this environment. That's natural selection at work. You can do this with different colored paper and compare your results. Try it yourself.
Thanks, Adam. Now let's review.
Today, we learned that living things have variations in their traits determined by.
Some of these traits can give them an advantage in surviving and finding mates.
This process is called natural selection. It causes living things to change over generations.
Join us next time on The Lab Report. I'm Dr. Jeff.
I'm Adam.
I'm Caroline.
And remember,
Always question, always wonder.